Welcome to today's episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. My name is David Gilliland. I'm one of your co-hosts. And we have today David McCombie from McCombie Group calling in out of Florida. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Nice to join you.
We're just delighted to have you on. We love to sort of dig in and understand all the ins and outs of the seven-figure journey, and all of us are in this space. And so we love talking with people who get us. But before we dive too much into that, tell us just a little bit about your business. How did you get started?
Sure. So I got started almost 15 years ago. It actually was in 2010 that the business was started. I had lost my job at a large consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, and ultimately had formed it really because I couldn't find a job that would pay me what I thought I was worth, and so it changed and meandered a little bit over that time period to where we are today. But, it basically had at its core various types of advisory work. Fast forwarding to today, it took me about, unfortunately, almost 9 years to really kind of find that right niche where, I really could double down and have kind of consistent success. That, what I ultimately discovered was that, helping business owners sell and doing M&A advisory for them was a niche that there was a tremendous amount of demand in this geography, and something of which I was good at and I enjoyed doing.
Nice. And you're down in the Florida area, right?
Correct. So I'm based in Coral Gables, a suburb of Miami.
Cool. And you said in the region, do you take care of like the Southeast US, or do you just go everywhere now? What's sort of your focus there? Or is it more type of business?
So we are industry generalists. We have expertise within the firm across lots of different industries, but we try to focus as much as possible geographically. We will take assignments anywhere if they are inbound, but we're not proactively chasing anything outside of the region. And that's really out of a strategic decision from my vantage point of how did I want to design my life. And I really wanted to have a life that was rooted in the community. I have 2 young daughters, and I didn't want to be on a plane all the time. And so, I really found an opportunity or a structure that worked well for me, both professionally and personally.
That's how I ended up doing a switch out of mine too. I was with a global consulting firm, all the travel stuff, and I had my young daughters that I was like, no. I want to be around, and realized if instead of serving the big companies, if I really just focused in on serving small companies, the growing and the entrepreneurs, and there's so many just in my community, that I could both have a successful career, have a big impact in the community, and be there for and with my kids, right? If I'm building success in the community they live in, then they're going to experience the success from it. So,
and to that point, David, I think there's a lot of other intangible elements like impact and, that I wasn't able to have that level of fulfillment in the big company, right?
Yeah.
But here I can proactively select who I work with, and, we're able to really see the value that we drive in their lives. And so for me, that has value above and beyond, the financials as well.
Yeah. The old work was, we helped their PE ratio improve. Woo-woo. Not that, wow, look, we just changed those people's lives and helped them fulfill their dreams, which is so much more fun.
Sure.
That's right. Cool. That's a fun little connection. Thanks for sharing, David. So in the last, say, 5 years, then you've really been doubling down in this space. And you ended up passing the $1 million mark a little bit ago already, and you're well beyond that. But what have you learned since passing, getting into the 7-figure space? What have you learned that's really helped you be more successful? And I use success broadly, both in the financial and in this personal realm that you're looking at that was important to you.
Yeah, interestingly, I personally found that when I doubled down on the geography, I ended up doing much better for a couple reasons. One, I find that in my line of business, it's a very complex sale. We don't have hundreds of engagements a year. We have a dozen, right? And that can really drive the needle given the size of each of them. But in my line of business, what I find is that the sale requires sometimes 4 to 5 times on average interactions before you close that engagement and start. And so, me getting on a plane and trying to, convince somebody in Virginia is very difficult relative to somebody else that's on the ground and doing that. And so aside from the inefficiency of the travel, I realized that my close rate was just so much higher, really focusing all of my time and attention on the backyard. And maybe at a certain point, somebody in my shoes would say, okay, I've fully exhausted the backyard, and then I go outside. But I think the real takeaway, if I were to tell my younger self, is, kind of really exhaust and put all your efforts into your own backyard, whatever that is, and then expand outwards. And having that level of focus, as counterintuitive as it is, because you want to be everything to everybody, particularly when you're starting, actually is the path to getting the most, traction and success.
Hey, I just hope the listeners are grabbing that, because I've seen it 100 times at least, that those people who are at that million to 3 million phase and are trying to be everything to everybody find that though they may get more revenue, their margins are shrinking drastically. Like, I just see it over and over again. Or they even fail to get more revenue because they're out there chasing everything. The efficiency of it is terrible. And this is really what we mean by strategy. We mean getting in tight, finding a place and really fulfilling that need well. And then that allows all your processes. And like you said, even travel time, like all the efficiencies of work can be built around who do you best serve. Now, you can't choose something so tight that there's no market, but really, until you're well above 10 million, there's plenty of market for just about any niche you pick. That's just the reality.
Yeah, and there's so many niches. I was just talking a couple of weeks ago to a guy that all he does is he engineers dairy farm operations, as a structural engineer. And, in that niche, he's the godfather, right? Very tiny, but he really, dominates, in it. From my vantage point, strategy is really around how do you prioritize your scarce time and resources. And typically, if you were to think about it like at the poker table, where you need to double down rather than spreading your chips all across the table.
Yeah. Well, fantastic insight. Thanks so much for sharing that. Any other nugget you might share? And maybe let's play another side. So this was a very personal one that helped you, because first you were trying to go bigger, larger, broader, and it just didn't pay. And like, I'm focusing on my backyard, and you saw it pay off. What about things you've seen that make a big difference in a sale or a merger acquisition? Any insights you'd share with the small businesses, the 7-figure businesses in sale or in purchase?
Yeah, I mean, there's dozens. I actually just completed a book, and so there's a lot. But I think
what's the name of the book? Let's let the listeners hear it.
So the book is called "Selling Your Business with Confidence."
Okay.
It's actually available now for pre-sale on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And Wiley is the publisher. It should be out physically in September.
Well, congratulations. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more than when I signed up. I didn't really know what I was signing up for, but I completed it, and I'm proud of it. But, in terms of what I think business owners, I think it's amazing to me that, before you sell a house, you spend a lot of time preparing and trying to put some window dressing to sell it. And yet so many sellers are reactive. They don't really go into the process intentionally and try to prepare beforehand, which can address a lot of the challenges during the actual process. Most people don't realize, but only 50% of letters of intent actually get closed. So there's a lot of the process is fraught with a lot of challenges. And so preparation beforehand, defined a lot of different ways, is super important in order to have a successful outcome, on the other side.
And what should they think time-wise in preparation for a seller in this case?
Yeah, so I always say that if you've got a drop dead date, if you want to be retired or out for whatever, you should be thinking approximately 5 to 6 years ahead of starting the process of going to sell. Why? Well, when you sell, if you're not willing to give at least a 2 to 3 year consulting or transitionary period, you're probably going to get a much smaller universe of potential buyers. And so you're going to have generally a discount. The actual process of selling the business takes on average about a year. 9 months is the average, but a year is definitely not out of the norm of reasonableness. And then I personally think you should give yourself a couple of years of buffer to be able to determine the right timing to go to market, right? That's an unfair advantage that a seller has. One of the few unfair advantages they have of determining when is that optimal time to go to market. And so when you go and work backwards, it ends up, adding up to, 5 or 6 years. Now, not everybody has that, that amount of time, but there's never a downside to preparing early. And I think the best way to look at that is to look at how private equity does it. Private equity funds, they're professional buyers. Their whole goal is to optimize the business and sell it for a profit. And they basically, from the day they buy it, have a game plan of, in general, the type of person they're going to sell to, what it's going to look like, and then they reverse engineer their way from point A to point B.
Yeah. I love that. And that's why when private equity buys in, they talk to the owners or the previous owners now, and there's certain demands of what has to show up in the numbers, how the team has to be organized, what the cap table has to look like. And in fact, they clean it up in the purchase, right? Like they're going through and they're methodically doing things that tell a story that when people look back, the stories told that they want them to hear and see, and therefore optimizing or maximizing the valuation on the sale.
Sure.
No, I really appreciate that. Again, it's that forethought and planning. And I would take that same insight and say, if you want to have a great business or a great life or a legacy left behind or an amazing team and culture, that you need to start thinking, not how do I fix it all today, but what's my roadmap? And I need to be thinking 3, 4, 5, 6 years out into the future and begin doing the building, right? It's the same work. It's the same stuff. Are we doing that long-term planning? So thank you, David. Just a great insight. Well, now you're at this phase, right? You're doing great. You're known in the Miami area and in your region. You're knocking it out of the ballpark, but you've got your own challenges. What are you facing now? What's the next thing for your long-term development and building of your business?
Yeah, I mean, look, from my vantage point, it's really that transition from being a strong practitioner to building an actual team that can operate, and me not necessarily being the center of everything.
Yeah.
And so that transition of being, a very strong kind of M&A practitioner to being a leader of a team that does M&A is a different skill set, right? And so, like most problems in business, I think it comes down to people. People is where in different facets, whether it's hiring and training and managing, those are all elements that are critical for me to get to my endpoint of success. We've done well from the vantage point of revenues and all that, but the business for me, for it to be truly successful, needs to get to a place where I'm not as directly involved in the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
And my highest and best use, and kind of what I feel I enjoy the most, tends to be the business development aspects, as well as the more strategic conversations at a high level, as opposed to the innards of the execution. So that's a longer term kind of vision of where I want to get. But with everything, and specifically, on the people front, that's a journey that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it doesn't. It takes thinking ahead, just like you were saying before. But to give us a feel of the complexity you're dealing with, how many team members do you actually have today?
So we currently have 7 team members, and full time. We have a couple of part time that support us. And ultimately, we're a fairly young team. And one of the things that we are trying to spend a lot of time on is, how do we cultivate and train and kind of create people kind of equally, or ideally at some point better equipped than me. But in a small firm, we don't have large training programs and everything that you normally would go through in the equivalent in a big Wall Street bank. And so it's something of which we have slowly been making progress, but I can't say that we have the secret sauce.
Yeah, no, and so there are about 10 people roughly that you're playing with together,
Mm-hmm.
and you're at this key inflection point then of, how do I stop working in my business all the time and get a little bit of time to create and build the business we need? Because the demands now, I imagine even most of your people around you, you probably get a ton of questions, people coming to you. You're the center point, right?
Yeah. Literally, I moved my desk out of the office and moved it into the bullpen with the broader team. I thought it was the best way for them to organically kind of hear what conversation should sound like, and really to be a full member of the team. So yeah, it does create some challenges in terms of just being able to concentrate, because there's always a question or something that you jump into.
Yeah. And the answers for most of those questions. Actually, you're pretty solid on most of them. They ask a question, you got an answer. Yeah, another asks a question, you got an answer, right? You may have to think through some things, but you're pretty good at it. You figured out all the areas of the business. And that's exactly what you were supposed to do at this point. But if we don't solve it, and if growth continues like it's been going, what does your life look 2 years from now?
I mean, from my vantage point, I've always chosen to throttle back growth over jeopardizing quality. And for me, my North Star at the firm is, how do we advise our own family's business? And, we manifest that in a lot of different ways, whether it's, recommending somebody doesn't sell, or referring them to a specialist that may be able to do something better. So, for me, the number one kind of asset that we have is our brand and reputation. I think what the upshot is, if we don't have the infrastructure, is there's an opportunity cost, right? There's revenue and upside that could have been captured. And the reality is that it's symbiotic, because a high growth business also provides not just the financial rewards, but the growth opportunities for everybody else in the team, right?
Yeah. For that key team, those key team members you were talking about earlier that may eventually be better than you were, it's required that you've got growth, that they see the opportunity, that there's strive, or one, we don't attract the talent, or two, we can't keep it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the throttling back has that effect of, well, the A players go elsewhere because they won't have a chance to, right?
Sure.
That is the risk. That's the risk. And so, when we play that into a dollars figure or into a life figure, the doubling of size is very reasonable in a services businesses like yours, without too much stretching, if we have the right team. And yet, if we don't, it either hits quality, which you don't let happen, or it hits lifestyle. So someone ends up paying the price if you're going to go to that size, right? Okay. So yeah, I love that you narrowed in quickly. Like, okay, this is a key thing. If we're going to grow, if we don't figure this out, a lot of the other things that we've done actually come apart, right? We lose some of them. So where to begin, especially when you have limited time and it's not like you have a whole team to develop and work on them. Let's go first. You mentioned something which was a North Star, basically a purpose that drives you. They're like, we're always serving this. We're advising our own family's business. We're always going to do the best for them that we possibly can. There's something about the genuineness of the value of the service you're going to deliver, and it will be your best every time, right? Like there's something pulling out there. And what would you say are other values that pull at you that matter so much to you?
I mean, for me personally, growth and learning are just kind of a core that kind of is a intrinsic motivator to me. I've always enjoyed it. And I think it's something aside from the professional benefit, something which is, inherently good in and of itself. If I was forced to retire, I don't think I ever would, but I would probably go and go back to school of some sort, right? And just
you find some way to keep learning because you just love it.
Yeah.
And that's core to who you are. There's probably a handful of other core values of just who you are. And ask this question, for those who are that driven to serve others as though it was their own family and to continually learn and develop, regardless of if you're getting a paycheck or not, you're just driven to do it. On your team, can you think of a few or one or two that they are that through and through?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, they wouldn't be here if they didn't have both of those, right?
Perfect.
And it took me a long time to get through that. I had some very painful periods where people were just, I could take the horse to water, but they're not going to drink, right?
That's exactly right.
Give them as many books as possible, but they just didn't have necessarily that intrinsic, desire. And I can get it. They have other life, priorities, vying, but ultimately what I wanted to create here was a tribe of people that enjoyed that kind of intellectual curiosity aside from the actual kind of work output. They could feed off of each other, right? And everybody in whatever is their specific area that they've bloomed would not just kind of be advanced in that area, but would kind of be pushing the boundary and want to be a thought leader in whatever that was, right? So kind of having that obsession, if you will, is something which I thankfully have been blessed or cursed, however you want to say it. But I think that's another value is, somebody, if they don't have an intrinsic desire to want to deliver excellence and kind of have that as a base, I don't think I can teach it.
That's perfect. And I bring this up for the following reason, and you're already set up well for it, but for some of our listeners, they might be thinking, I need to get someone leading. I need to get someone leading. I need to get someone leading. And they may go and get themselves a leader or find someone whose skills you would think would make them a great leader. But if their skills and they're a great leader, but they don't have some of these intrinsic things you're talking about that are key to you, not to every business. Other businesses, it's other things, other core values, as we call them. But if they didn't have that in line, you would find a lot of failures in building that next level leader that can run stuff, that can do things so you can step out and do the pieces you most love. So first is this fit of values, fit and alignment with your overall vision. Here's my North Star and here's my core values that I care about. That's just so key and so important. So I love that you did that. The next is you start to say, okay, so how do I practically start to hand off leadership decisions, even though I don't have a leadership space for them? Because you don't really, right? It's like, what do? Promote 3 people to each lead one other person a piece? And that's kind of weird. And so instead it's like, I've got the right people, the right fit as far as the organization. Now, as we start expanding and saying, I need people to think about the future of the business with me. And I need people to actively work on building the future of the business with me. And while they're actively building the future that they'll be running, I'm seeing my leaders bubble up. And so here's some practical things that may be helpful. And Let me ask a few questions and then I'll dive into it. Do you right now have a way that each one of your team members could signal and volunteer and jump in and they know what the strategic priority is of your business? Not the operational priorities. I'm sure they've got that, but the strategic priorities, what you're building for the future, the new stuff. Do they know what those are and have time and space to choose to plug in and be a part of that work today?
I would hope that the answer is yes. We do strategic planning sessions both annually and kind of check-ins on probably a quarterly basis. I think that so where we're going, I think that I hope that there's alignment. I think that the question though, where there may be a gap is there the room for them to kind of step up? If they took the initiative to raise their hand, for sure.
Yeah.
But is there that vacuum where somebody that may be a little bit less proactive would they be able to add? There may be a gap there.
Yeah, or even if we don't say proactive, but even for those who are deferring, who are watching others, are allowing others to do that, may hold back until they feel like, so it's not that they're not proactive, it's that they may just be gracious, letting other people go. It's okay. I'm doing well in my space. So yeah, different reasons people may not step in or step forward. And so let's talk about this vacuum. Let's create the vacuum in practical ways. So I love the way you talked about that. So first, let's look at your annual and quarterly pieces here, your strategy meetings and your quarterly check-ins on there. Who's invited to those?
I mean, given the size of our team, we have generally tried to have the entire organization.
Great. So they're there and they can see it. Then when we get to a strategic priority that's been chosen, and that was a big assumption, your strategy meetings, are you getting down to this is the priority of what the new strength we have to build in this business or the one we need to leverage? Do you identify one or maybe two things that are paramount for the year to conquer?
We did 3, but yeah.
You did 3. Are they operational or are they building the engine that they're going to operate later? Like, you don't have to share these.
Building they're all building the engine, right? It's how do we systematize? We have another one on the HR side.
Perfect. So the team is choosing which things are most important together. They're seeing that, they're doing that. Then when that's identified, who is the leader of each one of those different priorities?
That's where, quite frankly, there's probably a lot of room for improvement because I end up, being the
perfect. This is great. So you've already identified we've got a space we can create a vacuum just by asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
Who will own this priority? You've got the whole team there. Who will own the priority? And a name gets to be assigned. Now your name can be on one of them. You're 10 people. It should be. But maybe the other 2 can be owned by some other people. So that's a space is let's allow the ownership to be owned, shared. Someone else gets to own something.
Sure.
Now, but we've got to create more vacuum than that. So let's expand it a little. When you pick a priority today, you've got 3, you're owning those. When you leave that meeting, who knows if they're on one of those 3 teams? Not necessarily as the owner, because right now it's you owning all 3, but who knows if they're on the team to solve that given system you mentioned?
I mean, following those meetings, we typically have had, follow-up meetings where we work as a group addressing some of the different things, right? Because, for example, one of the tactics was around, essentially project management system and implementing one into there's a lot of moving parts, both in terms of choosing it, setting it up, and actually getting people to implement
full implementation, training, all that, right? Yeah.
But that's one example of something of which, we basically have broken up into smaller groups, and generally specific actions like that, there is a leader that's responsible for, let's say, that project management system.
Yeah, that's
But
fantastic. That giving them a leader. I'm just grabbing that for the listeners now because you've already got it.
sure.
But that's one of the spaces, right? So somebody leads the overall priority, but then we project manage it out together. We figure out what would our Gantt chart look like if we were rolling this out project management wise. Funny, we're doing a project management on project management, but whatever. We're putting that out there, and each one of the steps can have an owner, and that ownership matters because we're trying to teach them to lead, to own, to think like us. Having the ownership matters. So I love that you're doing that, and it can be laid out ahead of time. Here are the people that are going to own it. Here's the due dates. Here's we know we won if kind of thing. We win if the following is achieved at that step. And so that person has a chance to rise up and do something, right? Okay, keep going. Sorry, maybe I interrupt there a little bit. So you're rolling that out. You have owners for each of those little spaces. How often do you meet to look at that priority?
So we have been meeting more ad hoc as things develop. What we're trying to do is to put the different strategic initiatives into the project management software so that we have more specificity and an easier way to kind of see it in the bird's eye view of everything that's getting done. Because right now we often have ended up with kind of loose goals and timelines that end up with other priorities getting pushed, right? And so putting more specificity, I hope, will help us prioritize it.
Yeah, so let's talk through on that. So a lot of us don't have project management systems in place, and we can't rely on those. And even those, we're able to ignore them really well if we don't build a little discipline around it, right? And so I mean, even if you just put the simple, we call them your smarts underneath the priority. So you have a priority, then you have these goals that are simple, measurable, thing, right, relevant, time bound. The SMART goals basically are the steps. Each of the steps along the way with an owner, with a timeline. And we just ensure that every 2 weeks, that team, that's not all 10 anymore. That particular team was 4 of us, a leader, a few people, that once every 2 weeks, they have, after it's laid out, that laying out, like you said, you have another meeting where you lay it all out, that's perfect. But every time after that, every 2 weeks, we're going to have a touch-in that everybody comes together for 5 to 10 minutes and give us a red, yellow, green on if they're on track for their part. Some of them are like, yeah, I'm on track because mine doesn't start yet. Perfect, that's great. No, but you have a due date. Will you still be able to hit it? I'm going to be able to hit it. And then they can work that. Again, it's just a brief touch-in, but they know, one, this is their time that they're working with David. They're working with the boss on a key project that matters for everybody. So there's something about that. And 2, then they own it fully and they have responsibility for something that's above and beyond. It's outside of their day job. That's acting like an owner. That's thinking like a leader. And that's the exercise. We want them to build those muscles. And that's why we do it over and over again. While we're going to have a priority every quarter underneath those, here's a big annual ones. Here's what has to be done in Q1. Here's what has to be done in Q2. And if you can have 3 different people owning, if you have 3 priorities, and with 10, I'd probably keep the quarter priority down to, can I just do 1 in the quarter and make progress towards maybe 2? You just have limited time. Okay. It's just it's the reality of where you are. And so sometimes just being tighter, and if you can finish it sooner, great. You could start another one sooner, but the team gets the signal. Priorities doesn't mean wish list of all the things we want to do. Priority means everything else is sacrificed to make sure this is done. That's what priority is, right? And so now when things come up, and we want to reiterate that, because we want to give power to your team to say, because you have an entrepreneurial seizure hits you and you decide to ask for something cool you want to go create and do, you start talking with the team, getting excited. I need Susie to be able to say, David, that's great. And I love your idea. We're going to write it down because I think it's really valuable. But we all chose that this was the top priority. I need to know, does this undermine this priority or not? Like, does this count as a higher priority now where we're going to drop the priority we all agreed on and build something now and do this? And you're going to be tempted, no, I think we can do both. And Susie's job is to say, David, that's great, but which one happens first? When we're done with one, we can look at another. And that's power to give them that. They can own it. They can say, this is where it is, or they can bring it to you and say, you've asked me to do 3 other things now. Let's look at this plate that you've handed me. Tell me what should be removed. Are we going to be strategic together or not? For her to do that now empowers her to be a leader who can have a vision, who can hold the course, who can get something done, instead of a helper whose job it is to say, however I can help. Sure. And they just respond. And what that looks like is you're at the center of the bullpen and they're always asking you questions, and they'll always have to ask you questions because they'll never know when you're going to change your mind.
Yep.
So that can create some time and space. So think, great, we have every 2 weeks, little touches each priority team does, and they're only going to be putting in maybe an hour a week into this, maybe 2. One person's going to have a 4-hour week on a priority and the others are going to have nothing, right? Or they may be helping and supporting in some ways, but they're running their day job and they need to succeed at that first. That still is always their priority, is to make sure that they hit, we call them their big 3s, that they are earning the right to own that seat on the bus that you've given them. So they have to do that. But anyone who's doing that is allowed to be on the priority team and come in and own something. And what's happening is they're becoming the leaders. They don't have a formal position. They didn't get a raise for it. There wasn't any of that. But they're becoming leaders. They're learning to own something. They're learning to say this is a priority. They're learning to manage their time to pull it off. They're learning to work as a team. They're building the future instead of just reacting to the fires of today. And you're building leaders, and you'll be surprised how fast some of them pick up on it. And you'll be discouraged by how slow some others do. But that's some of that. The priority leader has a cool job, though. They don't just show up at those meetings. The priority leader also goes around and is like, hey, you're working on this. What kind of support do you need? What thoughts do you have? And when they're like, I don't know what to do, the priority leader learns to not give them an answer, but instead to say, well, help me understand the problem. Tell me the question that has to be solved. Come to me with a few prospective, proposed resolutions, answers to those problems, solutions, and tell me which one you think would be the most important, the one we ought to move with. Mm-hmm. Which one, where would you go? And then if it's something that you're worried about, like, that's really headed the wrong way, ask more questions.
Sure.
And if you think it's a B+ answer in the beginning when they're doing this, let them run with it. Because we're also building confidence to act. As long as it's not going to really tear us apart, let's let them act. And the next time, ask a little more questions until they're starting to get an A- answer. And then until they get an A answer, right? That it's not because they're coming up with your answer, but you see that they've really thought through. And in time, they're going to get so good at it that we're better than you at doing the things in your business, which is what you stated at the beginning that you wanted. They can only get that way if we give them questions, not answers. Answers keeps them under us. Questions helps them rise above us, right? The intellectual curiosity you talked about.
Sure.
Anyway, was that too much? Did I just completely throw up on you during this time? Probably did.
No, I mean, I actually took some notes here, and I think you're absolutely right. Questions are much more powerful, and people have a lot more ownership over something that they created themselves versus were told. So I agree 100%. And
one of the things that I found is if we can get a system or process in that creates time and space, and then we remember our role as guides, not as do-it-alls or know-it-alls, but just guides of people's potential is unlimited, and we can free that up. And I love that you have the desire to, and because of that, your team's going to succeed. You have the desire to do it. You already see it. You're already doing some great things. Thanks so much. I appreciate it and value the time and some of the nuggets you shared in the beginning. Again, plan 6 years in advance. Think about that and niche down in, get tight, own your backyard. And it doesn't have to be geographically, but own that backyard of yours. That's a huge win too. So again, thank you. Thank you so much. And David, how do people get in touch with you or maybe order your book or whatever else?
So probably best way would be my email. It's dmccombie at McCombiegroup.com, DMCCOMBIE at McCombiegroup.com. And they can also find me on LinkedIn.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And that concludes this episode of the 7-Figure Journey podcast. We appreciate all that was shared and learned. And for those of you who valued what you learned today, please share, do whatever it takes to get other 7-figure business owners to be able to participate in this community and learn with us. Striving, keep learning, keep growing, and keep caring. Until next time.